art. Heard this before? Perhaps in a museum or a gallery. Don't touch the art. It's 4 simple words. And yet, it disproportionately impacts 253 million blind or visually impaired people worldwide. Art prides itself on pushing boundaries, yet we still view creativity two-dimensionally. Literally. Instagram portraits, sculptures we must stay 10 feet away from at all times, the kind of art you can look at, but cannot fully experience. It is precisely this view that is stopping us from a more inclusive, innovative future. Making creative outlets accessible isn't just nice to have, it's essential. According to a global CEO study at IBM, creativity is the most crucial factor for future success. And yet, a survey by Adobe revealed that 75% of people don't feel they're living up to their creative potential. So what if I told you that there's a way for almost everyone, yes, including you, to unlock your creativity and experience the world in a way you've never experienced it before? It's easy. And it starts by viewing accessibility as an opportunity for creativity. Okay, so by now, I know what you're probably thinking. I'm a sighted 17-year-old. This talk is about accessibility, creativity, and blindness. Isn't that like a dolphin giving a keynote about open heart surgery? It's true. I'm not blind, and I'm not a professional artist. Funny enough, for the longest time, I was convinced that I was uncreative. A creative person was this cool, elusive edgelord, holed up in a dim room with brilliant ideas and black coffee, and I was a loud, awkward nerd with regrettable fashion sense, and a caffeine intolerance. However, 4 years ago, I discovered that creativity is significantly more accessible than most of us believe. I was volunteering at a center for blind students, and do you know what I noticed most? I noticed that here, when a student is struggling, it's viewed as an opportunity. The teacher has to creatively find a solution that works for the student. The emphasis was no longer about helping students fit the mold. It was about changing the mold. And that was beautiful. One evening, one of my friends from the Center for the Blind, Sarah, showed me a painting that I can never forget. And I'm going to show it to you. Before I do, I want all of you to take a second, close your eyes. Let me describe it to you first. Twinkling streetlights and trees with crisp fall foliage line the path for a couple in love. Colorful fractals dance on a rainy floor beneath their peaceful silhouette. Can you picture that? My guess is that if I asked each of you to come up with a version of this painting for yourself, you would all have vastly different interpretations. Okay, so here is what the painting actually looks like. It turns out that the artist, John Bramblett, lost his vision due to complications with seizures and epilepsy. I'll admit that when I first found out about this, I felt terrible. My heart went out to him. But then Sarah showed me a quote from Bramblett himself. He said, "My world is a more colorful place than ever before." She explained to me that while disability is challenging, it gives people like herself and Bramblett an opportunity to view the world differently. John Bramblett once aspired to be a creative writing teacher. Believe it or not, he didn't start painting seriously like this until after vision loss. So let me ask you, if he hadn't lost his vision, would he have become a world-renowned artist? His blindness was what allowed him to innovate in his field. using colors non-representationally to convey emotion and textures to bring the scene alive. He created work that could not only be aesthetically admired, but touched and intimately experienced. Just like each of you imagined a different version of this painting based on my description, artists who are blind imagine different worlds of possibility. Creativity isn't limited to visual definitions. I mean, creativity should include everyone. So why doesn't it? The medical model of disability. Now, this way of thinking views blindness as a physical limitation that must be cured in order to help people live normal lives. Look, I understand that the medical model comes from a really compassionate place. But when we talk about needing to cure blindness without actually listening to blind people, we walk a tightrope between empathy and pity. Instead, I learned to embrace the theory of complex embodiment. This is a framework that understands that disability is a complex identity, much like race or sexuality. Some people, for example, view their condition physically. Others consider it to be a cultural identity. Some people don't want to be defined by their disability, and for others, it is central to who they are. So if you want to learn more about blindness, ask people who are blind. You'll be surprised at how diverse individual experiences can be. Everyone, yes, including non-disabled people like me, benefits from inclusion. Did you know that typewriters were created to help blind people send letters? Voice control technology that we use every day, like Siri, was created to help blind people navigate apps. Disability should never be mistaken for inability. Just ask John Bramblett. He is the recipient of 3 Presidential Service Awards. His art has been sold in over 120 countries. Traditional narratives on blindness would have painted his story as tragedy, and then told him, don't touch the art. Bramblett's painting gave me a new perspective and a newfound love for tactile art. This interest would lead me to flour-caked hands and cinnamon-scented paints. I joined tactile art classes. Eventually, I got to teach tactile art classes. I even got to meet John Bramblett in real life. I went from thinking I was fundamentally uncreative to finding a passion for the arts. Because that's the thing. I wasn't uncreative. Our idea of creativity is just wrong. In the words of Sir Ken Robinson, an international advisor on education in the arts, if you're not prepared to be wrong, you'll never come up with anything original. Creativity isn't some elusive trait reserved only for the 1% of artists and geniuses. In fact, creativity doesn't require inherent intelligence at all. Creativity requires courage. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit, I was super daunted by taking my fundamentally hands-on teaching style online. The first tactile art workshop that I ever did virtually was a clay pottery class. In our clay substitute, flour and water literally refused to mold into a traditional form. I was super worried that my blind students would be discouraged by such a messy experience. Yet while I grappled with executing this pre-planned project, my students continued to create with delight. I saw clay and could only think of pottery, but they transformed it into silly putty, papier-mâché paste, textured paint. They reminded me that art doesn't play by the rules. Sometimes the best work happens when we stop planning and start improvising. That's what makes these students artists. Most people are terrified of improvising like this when it comes to creativity. We're comfortable with a well-planned strategy, and when a project veers from that strategy, we fear our ideas might be ridiculed, judged, even shamed. When we let this fear take over, more often than not, we stop generating ideas. We simply don't pursue creativity at all. The way to overcome this fear is to dismantle ableism. Now, current approaches to disability inclusion send one message: conform. We're afraid of disability because it deviates from our definition of normal. There was a poll published in the Ophthalmology Journal of the American Medical Association. They polled people nationwide and asked them, what's one of the worst health outcomes that could happen to you? Nearly 50% of respondents said losing vision. So where does this fear come from? It's because we can't imagine any other way to live than visually. We wrongly equate the right way of doing things with the sighted way of doing things. By reinforcing what we think of as normality, we are killing our creativity. Accessibility is currently an afterthought. We design products, artwork, buildings, and school systems assuming, well, everyone's non-disabled. And only then do we create separate spaces for those who don't fit this mold. If this separationist mentality continues, every one of us will be affected by it. According to the CDC, 1 in 4 have a disability. This means that it's likely that you have one, will develop one, or will become close to someone with one. So what can you do? Well, first, prioritize disability inclusion from the beginning. Post alt text descriptions on social media. Offer project-based 3D learning opportunities in schools. Build architecture intended for every person to enter. Next, collaborate with people with disabilities and learn from them. You literally can't do anything if you don't know it exists, right? So learn about ways you can bring accessibility to your school, workplace, and community, and spread your knowledge to others. And finally, reject the sighted savior mentality. Embrace complex embodiment and celebrate unique perspectives. Imagine a world where everyone could express themselves or belong. A school system or a museum where people could read a textbook, touch a sculpture, listen to music. A world where everyone felt called to innovate. In the words of John Bramblett, everyone has an artist somewhere inside them. Sometimes they just need a little help letting it out. To build a more creative world, we must fundamentally rethink the way we view disability. There is no right way to be creative. When we explore the unconventional, we develop new modes of learning, connecting, and problem solving. Accessibility is an opportunity for creativity. So smell the art, hear the art, feel the art, and yes, please touch the art.